Now let us look at social graces. What are social graces? Social graces are simply the graceful way in which we conduct ourselves in social situations. For example, greeting people, salutation. I'm sure you must have heard the saying, salutation is not love. That is because you greet people irrespective of who they are or how you feel about them. You don't wait until you love a person before you greet them. You don't wait until a person is superior to you before you greet them. You greet everybody with a simple hello or good morning or good afternoon or good evening, depending on the time of the day. It is important to always greet people because when you greet people, you show people that you recognize them, that you notice them, and that you respect them. You don't wait for a person to greet you first. You greet anyone that you see at the time that you see them. Let us also look at another aspect of social graces, which is making introductions. An introduction can be a personal introduction, which is when you're introducing yourself to another person or people. An introduction can also be a third-party introduction, which is when you're introducing one person to another person. Now, how do you introduce yourself to other people? You would say hello or good morning, depending on the situation, whether informal or formal. And you should always do that with a smile on your face. A smile shows that you are confident. And when you say hello to the person, you can go ahead and ask them how they are doing. Good morning, how are you today? Good morning, and you mention the person's name, depending on if they are your mates or if they are older people. If they are people within your peer group, you can address them by their first name. But if they are superior to you, you must always add their social title. You can say to your friend, "Good morning, Sandra. How are you today?" But if it's a person who you do not know, you can go ahead and say, "Good morning. My name is," you mention your name. And you allow them to respond to your greeting and also tell you their name. After they have done that, you can go ahead to tell them any other information about yourself that you are comfortable sharing at that point in time. But when you are making a third-party introduction, the rules are a little different. You must always be conscious of the hierarchy of the people that you're introducing. Because a person of seniority, a person of higher social prominence, or a person of authority is the person who receives an introduction. And what do I mean by receiving an introduction? The person is the person who is being introduced to. So for example, you wish to introduce your friend Sandra to your parents, your father for example. Your friend might be your classmate who is in your peer group, and your father is obviously an older person. So what you would do is say, "Daddy, I would like to introduce my friend Sandra to you." And then you turn to Sandra and say, "Sandra, meet my dad." That way, you are making your dad receive the introduction as the person of seniority. So always remember that you would mention the name or the title of the senior or older person first before mentioning the person who is being introduced. Now, if you were making introduction of people who are of the same age bracket, and they happen to be a male and a female, the female would receive the introduction. because courtesy demands ladies first. So you would turn to your friend who is a female and say, Sandra, I would like to introduce my friend Peter to you. And then you turn to Peter and say, Peter, meet Sandra. That is the order of making an introduction politely. But if they happen to be two females or two males, then the introduction could go either ways. But remember that the person of authority or seniority or higher social prominence is the one to receive an introduction. Now let us talk about shaking hands. Just like with making introduction, handshake has its own set of rules and it is very similar to that of making an introduction. Sometimes when we are making introduction of ourselves to other people, we also shake hands. But when shaking hands, we have to understand the rules that apply. The person of seniority, higher social prominence, or the person of authority is the person to first of all initiate a handshake. So as a child, you never offer your hand to an older person for a handshake. You always wait for them to offer their hands first and then you receive their hands for a handshake. So remember to never be the one to offer your hand to an older person. Amongst people of different genders who happen to be mates, the lady is the one to bring out her hand first for a handshake. Remember, as I said earlier, simply because courtesy demands ladies first. And when a lady offers a hand, the gentleman receives it. So as a gentleman is a man who is polite. So as a gentleman, you never offer your hand to a lady for a handshake. Except, of course, you happen to be a person of very high authority, very high social prominence, or a person of seniority. Now, when shaking hands, we also have to remember that there are other rules that apply. For example, you never squeeze a person's hand too tight. A handshake is not a show of physical strength. It's just a way to initiate physical contact when you're greeting a person. So a good handshake is firm, but never crushing. A good handshake only lasts for about 3 to 5 seconds. Don't hold a person's hand for longer than necessary. You pump a hand in an upwards or downwards motion. You don't swing a hand forth and backward. You also don't pull a person whose hand you are shaking closer to yourself. That is rude and disrespectful. When you are shaking hands, you must make sure that the web of your hand touches the web of the person whose hand you are shaking. And while shaking hands, you should make and maintain eye contact. You have to be able to look the person in the eye when shaking hands with them. And you should do that with a smile on your face. That is how to shake hands as a polite child. Now, let us talk about how to make friends. Are you very comfortable with making friends? If you are not, no problem. I will teach you the skills on how to make friends. Now, sometimes you see a person in school or at party or any social event for that matter who you really like and would like to make friends with them. All you need to do is apply these skills of social graces and approach them confidently. If it is an older person whom you wish to make friends with, all you need to do is approach them confidently but politely. Introduce yourself to them by saying good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, depending on the hour of the day, and then you go ahead and introduce yourself to them. They will most likely be happy to meet you, and they will also introduce themselves to you. If, for example, they tell you, "My name is MM," you should go ahead and ask them, "How may I address you?" Do not assume that it's okay to address them by their first name as they have told you. It will be more acceptable to address them using their social title. For example, Mr., Miss, Mrs., Doctor, Engineer, whatever it is their social title is. So you should always ask, "How may I address you?" And when they tell you how they may be addressed, you go ahead and address them as they wish to be addressed. When you want to make friends with people, always remember that the easiest way to impress a person is to pay them a compliment. Now, when you are paying a person a compliment, always be sure to make sure that you are sincere. So if you met a person who looks really beautiful, you may walk up to them and greet them, introduce yourself to them, and they will most likely introduce themselves to you. And then you may go ahead and say, "You really look beautiful." You do that with a smile on your face. And they will also find something to compliment about you, or sometimes they may simply say, "Thank you." And then you can go ahead and tell them a little about yourself, whatever it is you're comfortable sharing about yourself. For example, "I really enjoy being at this party. I love parties." And they may also tell you, "Yes, I also really enjoy being at this party." And you can also go ahead and tell them, "I school at so-so-so school. I am so-so-so years old. I am in so-so-so class." So when you tell them that, it gives them a little more idea about who you are and helps them to know the kinds of questions to ask you. And if you wish to know a little more about them, you may always ask them what information you wish to know about them. But always make sure that you do not ask questions that are seen as intrusive. Questions like your favorite colors, your favorite food, your favorite movies are acceptable questions. But don't go asking questions that have to do with people's personal lives, like their age, their marital status, and all those kinds of intrusive questions. When it is among people of your age bracket, then it's okay to tell them your age and also ask them how old they are, just to help you understand if really they are your mate. You may also go ahead and ask them questions such as favorite colors, favorite holiday destinations, favorite food, what kinds of games they like to play, their hobbies. All those are acceptable questions to ask when you're trying to get to know a person. Avoid asking questions that may appear too personal or too intrusive. For example, you shouldn't ask another child, "How much does your father have?" or "Are you rich?" You shouldn't ask such questions. Such questions are rude and unnecessarily intrusive. So when you wish to make friends with people, always make sure that you keep the conversation brief and at the same time very polite. Remember, there is always something good about another person which you may compliment. If it's not their appearance, it could be the way that they speak. It could be the way that they smile. It could simply be the way that they walk, or how kind they are towards other people. Always find something good about other people and say it to them. That way, you appear very polite, very enlightened, and very admirable. That is it about social graces. See you in the next module. Bye-bye.